For all of you who have just joined us, welcome to our webinar on the protection of ride-hailing services. My name is Sofia Pessoa Costa, and I work at the Directorate of Supervision of AMT. So before we begin with panel one, just a quick technical note. As you might have noticed, only the speakers and the moderator will have speaking privileges during this webinar. All other participants will remain muted throughout the session. If you have any questions, please send an email to the email address that you see now on the screen. So conferencias@amts autoridades.pt. And we will ask them during the discussion time. So now we will begin with panel one, which will explore how different countries regulate ride-hailing services. We will hear about governance models that aim to balance innovation, safety, and public interests. As you can see on the slide, the speakers in this panel are Anija Novikova from the Ministry of Transport of the Republic of Latvia, Gregor Wartatovic, I'm sorry, Gregor, if I didn't say your name correctly, from the General Inspectorate of Road Transport in Poland, and Hugo Oliveira, Director of Regulation at AMT. Anija, please. João will.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Once again, thank you very much for this initiative, for organizing the webinar. And thank you sincerely for inviting me to your office today. And I will share the Latvian experience of our governance model. And later, my colleague from the Road Transport Administration will explain about the consumer protection aspect. But let us start with the law. The law, which was created by my team already 8 years ago, and we have some lessons learned already from that. The ideas how to improve it. So at the time being, our regulation defines a lot of players in this ride-hailing field. We have defined the website or mobile application service. It is an online service for road transport. The other definition is website or mobile application service provider. It is an entrepreneur who, under a contract concluded with a carrier, organizes road transport online and provides related services. And we have defined that the passenger commercial transport with a light passenger car is carried out using a motor vehicle equipped with information about the website or mobile application service provider, the carrier, and the driver. That is intended exactly for protection of all sides, including passengers, so the passenger can know who is actually carrying out that service and who is the driver in this particular journey. The next thing is that from the January 22, 2020, the providers of website or mobile application services must be registered in the database of Road Transport Administration. It is a compulsory requirement. And carriers, both taxi companies, commercial passenger car companies, and drivers may use only the services which have been registered duly in this database. So it means that you cannot offer your service by a platform that has not been checked and duly registered in our country. And moreover, as of July 2021, the service provider must send information on drivers, vehicles, transport operations, the operations that have been offered, refused, and carried out to the state revenue service immediately after the end of the commercial transport operation. So they send the real-time data. After each journey has been completed, they submit this information to the state revenue service, and the state revenue service can check what has actually been done and what has been the cost. And they immediately calculate the taxes and all the revenues related to the service. Registry campaigns now, if I'm not mistaken, already for operators. And in order to register, they have a fee of 2,800 euros and annual monitoring fee of 1,223 euros. The next thing is the requirements for registration of such application. So the Road Transport Administration registers the provider of a website or mobile application service if the latter conforms to the following requirements. It has been registered in the EU, one of the member states, in accordance with the requirements and the laws and regulations of the country of registration of the merchant. It doesn't have any debts or taxes, duties, or other mandatory payments determined, and it has a full fully aligned with all written commitments submitted to the Consumer Rights Protection Center in relation to the elimination of the discovered infringements, and all decisions of the Consumer Rights Protection Service Center that have been imposed. So they have to make sure that any infringement that has been actually set and that has been recorded has been processed and eliminated any consequences. In addition to that, the applications have to ensure that the information of the upper service of the carriage of passengers for reward and the tariffs, the surcharge for additional services, the carrier, the driver, and the road vehicle, and also the possibility to request the road vehicle suitable for the person with disabilities. That is a set of additional services that might be requested by passenger, and they should ensure this option. Of course, if there is a trouble for every particular carrier, they often cooperate between themselves, and they arrange this specific vehicle that can arrive and provide the required service. Then the application should offer the possibility to request and confirm the service of carriage or reward online. That is one of the main things that the application provides everything, and then this information is later submitted to the controlling authorities. And with regard to the commercial passenger car service, the possibility to calculate a fare and settle the payment online by making non-cash payments. This is one of the requirements that we agreed upon when this regulation first entered into force, because there is a difference of so-called conventional taxi services and this app-based or ride-hailing services that in Latvia we only allow cash in taxi services, but in ride-hailing, only non-cash payments. So for those non-cash payments, they send an electronic invoice to the passenger, and this information they have received also has later transferred to the email address the passenger has registered in the application service. And I should explain a little bit probably on how the market is divided in Latvia. We still do have the conventional taxi service, but they can use either taximeter or they can use the mobile application. Sometimes they use the combination of both. But if they choose to use taximeter and offer the services within the scope of taxi, then they can accept cash. Then the fare is calculated according to the time, distance, and entry into the taxi according to these three basic components, and then there can be some additional charges if necessary. But basically, those are the components, and in the same way, the application submits the information on a real-time basis to the state revenue service. The taximeters do the same. It's just the advice that also sends the data. And so that is one of the main differences. And the taxis have so-called yellow numbers, as we say. They have yellow number plates on the vehicle. But the ride-hailing service providers, they just have the ordinary white number plate, and you never know in the traffic that he is actually performing a service. Taxi can be seen, and the controlling authority can know if something is wrong, but for others, it is only a digital control option. So yes, that is still a challenge. How to know what has been done on the road. So back to the ride-hailing app. There are a number of restrictions for them in our legislation. So the operation is blocked if the website or mobile application is offered without registration. It is done by the Road Transport Administration. It is prohibited to register and offer an unlicensed carrier, a driver who is not registered in the registry of taxi drivers, and a vehicle without a license card. So the application has to make sure that the carrier is licensed, the driver is registered, and the vehicle has a license card. So probably you have similar approach that there is a license for the company, and then a license card for every vehicle. You can take this license card for a month, for 6 months, whatever you need. But this license card ensures that the vehicle has technical inspection, the insurance, and everything else, because there can be a period if the car is in some repairs, and it's not operating. And for that period, you don't have to take this license card. But if you're back on the road, if you're performing the service, you again take the license card. So it is also prohibited. It is also prohibited to unreasonably deny access to the commercial passenger transport service, as well as to delete or correct information regarding the services accepted, refused, and provided on the website in the territory of Latvia for the drivers and road vehicles. So that application cannot simply deny service to the passenger if the passenger has requested it. It has to have a reasonable reason for that, a substantial reason, and the application cannot delete or correct the information on those services because we know that the digital world offers options for very skilled people to manipulate data if they are willing to. So that is something that we are looking at as well to avoid it. And unfortunately, there have been a number of cases that data has been manipulated, but it's not done by our institutions. It's a different story again. But still, there is a requirement, and they are not allowed to solve it. So to ensure the data transparency, the State Revenue Service regarding the commercial passenger transport drivers and vehicles provided in the state of Latvia shall be registered in one of the EU member states or a state of the treaty organization for at least 5 years. So this gives the application service providers possibility to not be registered in the country they're actually operating in. It's enough that they're registered in Switzerland, for example, or in Iceland. Yeah, but that's the European regulation overall. Then what concerns the passenger, if the passenger hires a commercial transportation service, but actually either through a verbal agreement or by using electronic communication services, including online or a website mobile application, this performance of the service contract is evidenced by a transaction receipt registered by the taximeter. And if the passenger hires a commercial transport service for the light passenger car online by a website or mobile application, then the performance is evidenced by an electronically prepared invoice, which is sent to this passenger's email address or available on the mobile application website. And in this way, the tax authorities can join on their side and check the transaction documents. Then what concerns the carrier? The carrier indicates the taxi fares on the vehicle body, displays the price list inside the vehicle on the dashboard, and also provides it on the website or mobile application if he chooses to work with one of those applications. But technically, nowadays, many taxi drivers work with applications because they know that it is easier to get a client there. Clients have almost forgotten how to just to hail a taxi on the street. It's usually happens very rarely, and they are looking for options in their phones, and that's why all the taxi drivers, most of them are using the applications. And for the commercial transport with passenger car and ride-hailing services, the fare is calculated according to the tariff specified by the service provider on the website or mobile application for hiring, for per kilometer and per minute. So it is the same principle as the taxi services. The difference is that the fare is calculated by an algorithm on the website. The tariffs and surcharges are indicated by the service provider on website and mobile application, and the fare for irregular passenger transport is determined by mutual agreement between the carrier and the client. The last one is something that does not all within scope of ride-hailing services. It can be emission service, for example, something specific where you do not need the immediate transaction. But yes, the carrier has those obligations to lay the tariffs so the passenger can be informed. Of course, often the passenger needs a taxi quite fast and does not look at the door, basically, where the drivers are, or simply asks the driver what the tariff will be. And then the driver has obligation to indicate what the tariff is. And in the application, it also displays the approximate fare. But they have to display the components of the fare. And the next thing is for the carriers, they are also obliged to accept a call from people with disabilities and ensure that the appropriate vehicle will be available. And usually they, as I said, cooperate between each other and ensure such vehicle. And in a commercial transport by taxi or light passenger car, the driver is obliged, upon the request of authorized control officials, submit the documents necessary for the transport inspection and provide the ability to read the taximeter's total indicators or the information about the transport services registered on the website or mobile application. So if the controlling institution requires, the information should be displayed either in the taximeter or the mobile application. It has to have all the breakdown of the price and the service that has just been carried out. What concerns the driver again? The commercial transport with a light passenger vehicle, drivers have to use the website or mobile application to calculate the fare and to use the program that provides the possibility to request, confirm, or cancel the transport service online, which correspondingly calculates the fare and makes the cashless payments. So in this case, the drivers rely on the fare calculation algorithm provided by the application, and the program has to ensure all those functions of requesting, confirming, and canceling the service. And it should be agreed by both sides. You cannot unreasonably deny that. So it is prohibited from providing passenger commercial transport services if the mobile application or website does not operate in online mode. The driver has to make sure that it is actually online, because otherwise it will not transfer the data, and it is very important because the passenger may not pay attention to the fact that it is not operating online, but it's still very important, and the company and the driver can be penalized for that. It is also prohibited from receiving payment for passengers in cash. So this is for the ride-hailing services, and it is prohibited to pick up passengers using other means of requesting commercial transport services. So this is a way how we try to still draw a line between those two types of service, that taxi can be requested on the street simply by walking to it, but the ride-hailing service can be only requested in a mobile device. And the service provider has to submit to the carrier all the information that they should be jointly responsible for the commercial transport service. This is quite important. That's not just the driver or the carrier or the application, but they are all together responsible for the transport service. Because frankly, mobile application service providers like to define themselves as simply cooperation partners, but they are still jointly responsible. And the last entry from my side is about the sanctions. And the sanctions are in two slots for using an unregistered website or mobile application to provide passenger transport services. The fine of 50 to 650 euros is imposed on the driver, and 350 to 900 euros on the carrier. And the other one is for offering a carrier driver or vehicle that does not meet the requirements on this website or mobile application. The fine is 350 to 900 euros to the mobile application service provider. So this is the way we have tried to make sure that all the parties are responsible, that all the parties are very well aware of their applications. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anija, for your presentation on the ride-hailing services governing model in Latvia. We will now give word to Gregors from the General Inspectorate of Road Transport in Poland. Gregors?
Yes, I'm here. Wait a minute. I will share my presentation.
Okay. Yes, please.
Yes, from the taxi.
So we can.
Do you see my presentation? Okay. So my name is Gregory. I work for the General Inspectorate of Road Transport. Okay, so here we start. I would like to talk more about intermediation in passenger transport in Poland. I apologize for my English in advance because I don't speak English fluently, but I will try to share my presentation as good as I can. So, first of all, according to the Road Transport Act, Polish Road Transport Act of 6th September 2001, undertaking and carrying out road transport as a passenger transport intermediary requires the relevant license. In Poland,
Gregor, let me just interrupt you. Could you put your presentation in slideshow so that we can see it bigger, because it's not easy to read. So below the screen, you have the slideshow option.
I'm sorry, okay. What about now? Is better?
It's much better. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Now we
Thank
can
you.
read. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Okay. Okay. So in Poland, there are two types of domestic national license. So we have national intermediary license and taxi service license. Wait a second. So there are two types of license. Transport license is an official document that authorizes the holder to conduct transport as a passenger transport in their way. So on this slide, we can see our intermediary license. This such a pink document. The General Inspectorate of Road Transport issue such a document only after entrepreneur will is after this document is obtained, an entrepreneur can legally provide passenger transport in Poland relating to passenger transport intermediary. Okay, dobrze. Wait a second. Dobra. So this license is granted for a fixed period of time, not shorter than 2 years and not longer than 50 years, depending on the entrepreneur request. We can see on this slide a form which every entrepreneur should fill it in. According to the Polish Road Transport Act, this type of license is issued by the General Inspector of Road Transport, who oversees transport organization. So the General Inspector of Road Transport is appointed to control compliance with the provisions enforced in the field of road transport and non-profit transport of people and the goods, works with the primary aim of reducing negative phenomena in road transport. So what about requirements? Intermediary license is issued as a administrative decision. So the General Inspectorate of Road Transport is a body which issued that kind of document. So the entrepreneur applying for the license must meet the specific requirements. So to obtain it, an entrepreneur must meet several strictly defined conditions. So first of all, good reputation, namely no serious violations of transport law, labor law, or tax regulations, and as well as no criminal record, financial capacity. So an entrepreneur must be in a financial situation that allows for undertaking and conducting business activity in the field of road transport determined by available financial resources or assets in the amount of 5,000 Polish zlotys. It's about more than 1,000 euros. And as well as entrepreneur must be entered in the Polish Register of Entrepreneurs. What about the cost of this kind of license? It depends on the period for which the license was issued, from amount of 4,000 to 400 to 500 Polish zlotys is about more or less 100 euro. On this slide, we can see as I mentioned before, our intermediary license and a copy of the license for the granting authority. So for us, for the General Inspectorate of Road Transport. What about obligations of intermediaries in the carriage of passengers? So, first of all, I would like to say that an entrepreneur conducting intermediation in the carriage of persons is obliged to carry out the verification whether the entrepreneur to whom he transferred passenger transport orders has the appropriate license relating to domestic road transport of passengers. So, namely, what I mentioned before, taxi services license. So each entrepreneur must obtain a Polish taxi services license before starting the cooperation. What about else? Maintaining in electronic form a register of submitted passenger transport orders, and entrepreneur must storing the information collected in this register for a period of 5 years. Moreover, maintaining in electronic form a register of entrepreneurs commissioned to transport passengers and storing the information collected in these registers for a period of 5 years. So each entrepreneur each entrepreneur who have a intermediary license and before and when he is obliged to maintain a register of entrepreneurs to whom cooperate with, and providing the relevant authorities with information whether the verification has been carried out. So, for example, the General Inspectorate of Road Transport can ask an entrepreneur to show his registers, and he must show us this register, that he must prove that he maintained these registers, and what is more, taking action in order to ensure that the safety of passengers transport. What about else? An entrepreneur conducting intermediation in the carriage of persons is obliged to verify persons carrying out carriage of persons commissioned on behalf of the entrepreneur in terms of identity. So, in other words, when an entrepreneur who have an intermediary license need to verify before starting cooperation an identity of each person who have a taxi services license. So if an entrepreneur wants to start cooperation with some taxi driver, for example, with I don't know, Tom Cruise, that Tom Cruise needs to show his ID or passport, some identification document, and what is more, possession of the appropriate authorization to drive a motor vehicle. So I mean driving license. And from June 2024, each taxi driver needs to obtain a Polish driving license. I will talk about it later on. And no criminal record for crimes against life and health and against sexual freedom and decency, as well as for crimes referred to drug addiction, and no any final judgment prohibiting the practice of driving. What about the circumstances of license withdrawal? a road carrier holding a transport license must meet certain conditions during the whole time of conducting business. Otherwise, the General Inspector of Road Transport may withdraw the license, intermediary license. So, the Road Transport Act say that the license shall be withdrawn in some cases. So, when a final judgment has been issued prohibiting the entrepreneur from conducting the business activity covered by the license, or when an entrepreneur can't do his business regarding to transportation, when the entrepreneur has not commenced the business activity covered by the license within 6 months of the date of its issuance. So when you are an entrepreneur and you need to start your activity regarding to intermediary transportation within 6 months, it's yes, it is very important. So you have 6 months to start your activity after you obtain the license. When the holder does not meet the requirements for conducting road transport activities, has grossly violated the conditions specified in the license on other conditions for conducting the activity covered by the license, as specified by Polish law, has transferred the license to a third party, has ceased conducting the business activity covered by the license, has grossly violated regulations on drivers' working hours or driver qualifications, or the holder of a road transport license for intermediation in the transport of passengers performs such intermediation activities on behalf of an entity that does not have the appropriate license. So this is the case when an entrepreneur start cooperation with a subject, with a other entrepreneur which don't have a taxi services license. The license may be, so maybe it depends on us, on our body, be withdrawn if this holder fails to submit within the prescribed time frame specific information and documents. So when the General Inspectorate of Road Transport ask an entrepreneur, give us your registers, show us that you're maintaining this kind of registers described in the Road Transport Act, and an entrepreneur does not show us these registers, so we can withdraw his license. Flagrantly or repeatedly violates the regulations regarding permissible weight, axle rolls or vehicle dimensions, or arbitrarily change the readings of measurement and control devices or tachographs installed in the vehicle excluding license for domestic road transport in the field of passenger transport by taxi, changes or delays data recorded in the digital tachograph or on the driver card, company card. What about statistics? So, General Inspector of the Road Transport in 2023 withdrawn 16 license. In 2024, one license was withdrawn, and so far in 2025, 32 licenses were withdrawn. Currently, at the moment, there is 579 licenses issued at the moment, and I would like to say also Why so changes in Polish law? Why such obligations, such requirements? Over the past few years, passenger car transportation has seen a surge popularity in Poland. Such transportation was ordered via mobile app. Often the service was performed by entities, individuals without a proper passenger transportation license. Due to simplified regulation, the cost of these transportation services differed significantly from those of licensed taxi services, and this led to waves of dissatisfaction for professional taxi companies as well as entities directly providing this type of transportation legally. So as a result of parliamentary work and taking into account numerous expert comments, an amendment to the Road Transport Act was adopted on May 2019. So years of work on regulating passenger transport regulation, the segment can be considered as consensus reached by the legislature, taking into account the interest of taxi companies and entities providing passenger transport on occasional basis. What is more, until the introduction of the amending regulations, almost any driver in Poland could afford to install the ride-hailing app and thus start earning money. However, this solution, as I mentioned before, raised numerous concerns among taxi drivers who were reluctant to accept this form of competition. From the taxi drivers' perspective, they had significantly more obligations to fulfill. Therefore, there was no possibility of fair competition in the services provided between passenger transport companies and taxi drivers. It could therefore be said that it was a legal response to the numerous and burdensome protests by taxi companies. What is more, when analyzing the provisions regarding the rules for obtaining a license to provide domestic road transport in the field of taxi passenger transport, accessibility to this profession and conducting specific types of business activity, certain simplification should be noted in accessing the regulated range of services. The principles and procedure for obtaining a license to provide passenger transport by taxi are specified in the Road Transport Act. And according to the Polish Road Transport Act, an entity applying for the taxi license is no longer required to pass an examination on the city's topography. The license fee has also been reduced. What about more? In summary, the new regulations require Uber or other companies like Bolt employees to hold a passenger transport license. Vehicles must be appropriately marked with stickers and a warning light and equipped with taximeters. As for the benefits for drivers, this include full tips and the ability for use taxi ranks and enter restricted zones. And what about sanctions? So as I mentioned before, each taxi driver needs to obtain a Polish driving license, and pursuant to the Road Transport Act, an entrepreneur acting as a passenger transport intermediary who fails to comply with the obligation to verify that the taxi drivers with whom he cooperates hold a Polish driving license shall be subject to a fine of 10,000 Polish zlotys, is about more than 2,000 euros. And when an entrepreneur acting as a intermediary in passenger transport remains in breach of their verification obligation, the fine shall increase to 50,000 Polish zlotys. It's about more than 2,000 euros. And so, as I mentioned before, there are almost 600 licenses issued by the General Inspectorate of Transport, and day by day we control entrepreneurs who possess the intermediary license, and we try to control them day by day. And I think that's all. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gregors, for your presentation on ride-hailing services governing model in Poland. So I'll now give word to Hugo, who will present how ride-hailing services are organized here in Portugal.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to this webinar. It's up to me to present the Portuguese legal framework and underline some differences between this kind of services with taxi services. Our law, the legal framework was established in 2018. Like our board said, this kind of services in Portugal, there's an abbreviation TVD that can be translated to individual and paid passenger transporting unmarked vehicles using digital platforms. This legal framework applies only to these services because taxis have a specific legal framework with substantial differences. The legal framework from taxis is from 2023, and for instance, taxis can use bus lanes, taxis can be subject to PSO contracts for on-demand services, but the ride-hailing cannot use bus lanes and be subject to PSO contracts. There are more differences, but these are more substantial. Of course, a ride-hailing platform can provide services for ride-hailing and taxis, both, but they must separate both activities, and the ride-hailing has a legal framework on its own, and taxis has a legal framework from its own. The fares are different, the training is different, there are substantial differences. Well, this law aims to ensure passengers' safety, service quality, and transparency in multiple dispositions, encourage sustainable mobility solutions, fostering innovation. So it tries to balance market freedom with regulatory oversight. So the business models are free at some point. They must comply with the rules that I will explain, but mainly each platform can develop its own business model. The licensing authority is IMT. It's a public body with legal powers for licensing and technical harmonization in this mode of transport as others in Portugal, and licenses TVD operators, drivers, and platforms. They all have background check requirements, criminal offenses, tax offenses. So the requirements are almost the same for these three actors of this market. IMT is a regulatory body. It has legal powers for supervision, ensure legal compliance, monitors the quality of service, And of course, it must act with coordination of the other authorities. The law enforcement, for instance, on the roads are made by security forces, but AMT and EMT work closely to the security forces to make inspections on the roads. There's another authority that is responsible for monitoring legal labor rules, is ACT, Authority for Working Conditions. And of course, this authority also works closely to AMT and EMT and the security forces. The main rule for drivers in the matters of legal labor rules is that each driver can't drive more than 10 hours a day. So each platform must monitor the hours that were used by providing services by each driver. So this market there are three actors on the Portuguese market: the electronic platforms, the TVD operators, and the TVD drivers. The drivers can't be linked directly to the platforms. They must be linked to the operators, and the operators are linked to the platforms. The operators and the platforms are jointly liable for checking all the legal requirements, but we know that other countries don't have these three actors. Sometimes just the platform and the drivers, but the Portuguese model has these three actors. And the operators, of course, may only use vehicles that are registered in the platform, must test the compliance with legal requirements, and the drivers can be self-employed or employees on the third party, the operator. For vehicle requirements, only on-market passenger vehicles can be used on this type of service. They can have a maximum capacity of 9 seats. They can't be over than 7 years old, the vehicles, so only new vehicles. They cannot pick passengers on the street, outside the platform, so it's not acceptable cashless payments. All payments on these services must be made through card digital platform. Well, the vehicles are unmarked, but they have to have an identify sign that must be placed on visible form. It's a small sign like this size that says TVDE. It's the only thing that can distinguish that vehicle from the others. It's mandatory to the vehicles to have working air conditioning, seat belts. They must be regularly maintained. They have to be clean and comfort, of course, is the minimum. They also must carry valid civil liability to cover all passengers and comply with environmental emission standards. Of course, there are more requirements. These are the main. Pricing. The platform must provide users, before the start of each trip, of course, the price calculation of the fares. It includes time, distance, and also demand. So it's possible to the prices varies. It depends on the demand of that service in each part of the city. It may differ. However, the intermediation fees cannot exceed 25% of the fare in each trip. So Some platforms can go until this maximum or charge another intermediation fee. Like I said, the payments are required to be electronic, so it's a way to ensure safety, traceability, and no extra charges outside the platform. The taxis can have cash payments, but also the taximeter is linked to the tax authority, so it's another way to ensure the traceability of payments. Um, for consumer protection, Susanna will explore more this matter, but to say that you must make available digital invoices with fair route and time. That is must be provided to consumers, and the platforms must provide easy and immediate access to a national complaints platform. In Portugal, we have a national complaints platform, electronic platform, where all services, not only for transport, they are linked. Everybody can access that platform everywhere. But in this case, or for platforms and other transportation modes that have a website, they must provide access to that platform. So everybody can make a complaint everywhere, while eating, while traveling, while everywhere. There's also an ordinance from 2018. I'm sorry to say, I forgot to say, there are registered in Portugal 17 platforms, but only 3 are active. Operators, we have registered almost 12,000, and drivers almost 70,000 drivers they are registered. There's another difference from these kind of services and taxis. On these services, they can provide services everywhere in the country without restrictions. Taxis, they are restricted to municipalities. They only can provide services inside of a municipality, and they have a maximum number of drivers. Like I said, we have also an ordinance from 2018 that regulates training courses. Um, it's the law states that training entities cannot carry out activities as a TVD operator, of course. There's a mandatory initial training with 50 hours. Drivers must complete training on safety, ethics, customer service, first aid, and other issues. They must have a regular refresher courses every 5 years, because the license for drivers is limited to a maximum of 5 years. The TVD operators, they are licensed for 10 years. And these refresher courses have theoretical and practical assessments. The training institutions are audited by IMT and EMT. Of course, is the main goal of these requirements is provide safe purchase and professional services to passengers. The operator activity must ensure safety, compliance, and maintain the driver and the vehicle records. Operators share liability for violations and not compliance with the legal requirements. The platform also are jointly liable with the operators, and the platform must ensure transparent pricing, protect data, and reports monthly to the authorities with several data like trips, the duration of trips, the distance made. They must report that monthly. As I said, multiple public bodies supervise TVD service. Regarding licenses, insurance, driver certification, platform data. The electronics platforms must pay a monthly contribution. It's like 5% of the value of the intermediation fees. That monthly contribution it's then divided by all public entities, and the main goal of this monthly contribution is to support the costs of monitoring and supervising the market. There are several penalties for non-compliance. They can lead to suspension of the license, suspension or the withdrawal of those licenses, depending on the misdemeanors that are on the concrete case. For passenger rights, it's what the main goal of AMT is to ensure or guarantee that passengers know fares up front, they are served by certified drivers, and they enjoy a safe, insured, and comfortable ride. All these actors must comply with data protection, and the rules are European, so everybody knows the rules that must be complied. The legal framework encourage, of course, the use of electric and hybrid vehicles, not only because they have to have less than 7 years, but they are also obliged to comply with the European rules for emissions. The framework does not prohibit integration or complementary with other public transport systems. It's up to the companies and it's up to the local authorities to integrate those services. Mainly, this integration or complementary it's included on the business model of the platform. And of course, like I said, the framework is compatible with international efforts to combat climate change. Of course, the market is evolving. We also learn from our experience for the data that we collect. And we made several recommendations to improve the legal framework in many various areas. I will just underline some of those recommendations. So AMT made recommendations to the government and to our parliament to raise professional standards. We made recommendations to enhance fair transparency, and we also made recommendations for safety improvements and stronger authority coordination. And this stronger authority coordination must be based on the national data platform for many indicators, like the time that the total time that drivers use to provide services. And that's it. Thank you all.
Thank you, Hugo, for your presentation of ride-hailing services governing model in Portugal. We now move on to the discussion. We have a couple of questions, which I propose we answer in the same way as we at the presentations. But before, I would like to ask Gregor about the 529 intermediary licenses that you talked about.
Yes.
So if I understood correctly, these are licenses for the entrepreneurs that intermediate between platforms and drivers, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So this compares with about 11,000 in Portugal. Because in Portugal, we have about around 11,000 licenses or firms which intermediate between platforms and drivers, as in Hugo's slide, the first slide, I think. So for you, it's 529, right?
There are 579 licenses are issued at the moment. Yes, there are about less than 600 licenses valid. Yes, at the moment. Yes, intermediary license, of course, because the taxi services license is more. It's many more. Yes.
Okay, interesting. So maybe now I'm going to you could focus on what are the main regulatory challenges that your country faced when integrating ride-hailing services. Anija, I'm going to give you over.
Well, thank you. If I may take a couple of minutes, I would be happy to reflect a little bit on the Portuguese experience because we have a lot of similarities, actually.
Yeah.
We also have this restriction of the age for the vehicle, but it's more set like emission standard, because it refers to certain years of manufacture, and then it goes by grams per 100 kilometers, and according to the WLTP or NEDEC standards, so it's the same approach. But I noticed that you do have something that is a percentage of platform intermediary fare that goes for the benefits of control authorities and for the maintenance of the system. How have you named it your legal system? How is it called? And I'm very interested in that because that is something that we have been looking at currently.
Well, it's called a tax for supervision and regulation, contribution for supervision and regulation. So I can read the law. It says electronic platforms operators are subject to a payment intended to offset the administrative costs of regulation and oversight their activities and to encourage compliance with national objectives of urban mobility. Because this contribution goes to several entities, and part of that contribution goes for a fund that gives some subsidies to other modes of transport to increase digitalization, increase decarbonization. So this contribution have many goals, and it's a way to offset costs or to contribute to costs of regulatory bodies, but other goals of public policy.
course. Thank you. It's a very noble goal, and it works, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm very happy for you that you have managed to do it. We're on the way. That is actually one of the challenges currently, because our main player in the market, we have 4 applications, but not all of them have taken a lot of the market share. There is one big, which is Estonian based, and it holds more than 90% of the market. And we have now considering how to make them benefit to the market itself, namely to the public transport, because there needs to be some balance between the private vehicles and the public, because those are anyway the private cars which are used for these services, and our goal is not to make them multiple, even more. The most effective passenger flow is public transport or using public transport lines in that respect. Yes, thank you for that. And another of our challenges is ensuring all the liabilities of carriers in relation to the application service providers. Not so much of the passenger rights, maybe, but this cooperation model of carrier and the application service provider, because they are now in a way cooperation partners. In our legal system, the carrier is not allowed to be self-employed. They all have to be legal entities. Either they can be what we call individual merchant, that he can be just one person, one driver, one director of the company, but he has to register his company. And then this company can employ up to 5 people. Yes, the drivers may be more than the vehicles, that's normal. And in that case, often those carriers are complaining that the platforms using their power are not in compliance with the current tax regulations, that their commission that they're taking from the carrier is one share from this payments made by the client, but the tax authority requires carrier to pay the VAT from the whole amount. So it's 2 payments. It's for the carriage and for the intermediary service. And VAT is calculated for both, but the carrier cannot see this commission the app provider is taking. They're informed, but they have no access to that. The straight revenue service calculates this VAT to the carrier for the whole amount. That is something that they can apply in ride-hailing service, but they cannot apply it in taxi services, although they are doing that. So the taxi companies are very unhappy about this part, and they're now struggling to ensure that they are treated equally and fairly. That is one thing. And yes, we have been looking at the age of the vehicles again. We last year we established a little bit different limits harmonized with the EU regulations, but there might be some point that we would make them from a certain year, a certain share of taxi should be electric, because there are support in incentives available to purchase an electric vehicle, and that is something we have been looking at as well.
Thank you. Gregor, so could I ask you what are in Poland the main regulatory challenge you have faced when integrating ride-hailing services?
Okay, I'm here. Wait a second. Yes. So okay. As I mentioned before, the entities like Uber in the new our legal definitions means that drivers providing passenger transport via such platforms like Uber or Bolt are required to have an appropriately equipped and market motor vehicle intended for transporting no more than 9 passengers and those vehicles in Uber or Bolt or other entrepreneur fleet and other similar vehicles must be appropriately marked. So I mean those vehicles must have an additional white or yellow light with the word taxi on the roof and be equipped with a taximeter. What is more, and such a vehicle used as a taxi must meet technical conditions of vehicles regarding our Polish law, including at least 2 passenger seats and compartment for passenger hand luggage and spare tire. Okay, and what else? So what about challengers? Wait a second. So as I mentioned before, we developed some changes in our Road Transport Act to face these kind of challengers. So as I mentioned before, applicants for transportation services must appear at the company's headquarters. So, for example, at the Uber's headquarters to confirm the entity, and this process involves taking a photo of a driver. Driving license are checked. So, as I mentioned before, each taxi driver must obtain a Polish driving license because Uber or Bolt hire many foreigners which from, for example, Ukraine or Bangladesh. So our legislators stated that to ensure safety of passengers, we amended the Polish Road Transport Act, so each taxi driver have to obtain a Polish driving license. Wait a second, I will tell you more. So I would like to say that we have some legal I would like to say legal tools to verify entrepreneurs which have intermediate license, but the Road Transport Act says that we can verify what I mentioned before, electronic register of entrepreneurs or orders, or check other documents like, as I mentioned before, good reputation, financial capacity. If the entrepreneur has financial resources or assets in the amount more than 5,000 euros, but there are some other bodies like police or inspection for transport, and they check if the taxi driver has a Polish driving license or if has a taxi services license of if
Thank you, Gregor. Maybe I'm going to stop you there for time,
Okay.
but for time reasons, I'm going to let Hugo also answer this question on the main regulatory challenges in integrating ride-hailing services. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
we
you.
have many challenges not only on this market but in other markets that ANT has jurisdiction, like in road, rail, ports, maritime transport. So we have many challenges. I think the main challenge on this market is compliance. Not only for compliance from the operators, the drivers, and platforms on ride hailing, but also in taxis and also outside these markets. But some individuals act like ride hailing or taxis, and it's difficult to supervise these individuals off the grid and off these markets, because in TVD and taxis we have we have several tools to supervise and get data, and individuals who try to pass under these of these regulations are difficult to find, difficult to get to justice or to pay fines. We'll also have some issues to solve on our legal framework, because we must adapt and evolve. This market started in 2018 and had an exponential growth. So we must adapt to reality. And we would like to have more public data, because we have a lot of data from the market. We receive that data for supervision and to monitor the market, but not all that data is public, like in other modes of transport. And we think that more transparency and make more data public will help to understand better and to people to get to know better this market and the potential of this market. Because this market can be important when working together with the other public operators in segments or in niches that each one can't go. And we have a lot of difficulties to provide services outside the big cities, and ride hailing can be important on these niches that are not served by other operators. So several issues that we are dealing with.
Thank you, Hugo. We are almost near our time, but maybe we can go for a last round of questions, just 2 or 3 minutes on how in your countries, which strategies you use to balance innovation with sustainability and public interest. So how do you do that in your countries, Anisia?
Well, we are now dealing with Riga metropolitan area public transport plan. It has been adopted in the end of the previous year, and it is frankly a very challenging journey to establish a proper cooperation at the political level with the municipality of the capital city and the state institutions, because we're aiming at joining together forces and joining together the budgets, which is the most challenging part, as you might assume, to establish a joint Riga metropolitan area transport system, which would consist of the city transport integrated with the regional transport buses and trains that come into the city. It sounds not that complicated in terms of planning, but it is from the budget perspective, because the budget should be taken from two different sources, and the mechanism in order to deal with it should be established. And that is something that we have started doing recently. We are thinking of a separate body, which is not an institution, but like an administrative consultative board to be established that could make those decisions. And we have a pilot project now that is in this Riga area that combines Riga city ticket for public transport together with train ticket, which is regional. And you can buy it for €2, otherwise it together would cost €3. And with this ticket, you can travel one leg of the train route and whatever transport in the city you wish. So those are the challenges, mainly not that much shifting to greener or digitalized world, because it's happening at the same time with all the initiatives, both ticketing and everything, but to transform the system in a way that it is sustainable and cost effective.
Thank you, Anija. Gregor, so would you like to tell us about the strategies in Poland to balance innovation with public interest and sustainability?
Okay, I can say that we're thinking about such a problem that we're thinking about in order to facilitate the roadside inspection and driver verification process. As I mentioned before, we're thinking about the possibility of creating one system enabling online processing of key data. Such a solution, in our opinion, would support transport companies or transport intermediaries and law enforcement agencies like our police or our body, because we have problem that data regarding drivers and vehicles is scattered across various registers, and only some of them are being located in our central registers of vehicles and drivers. And what is more, this inconsistent system is partially paper-based, so we try to create something electronically, because as a result, the driver verification process and access to complete and confirmed information are difficult, and it's time consuming. And but for instance, our Ministry of Digital Affairs has launched the Czech driver authorization service that to facilitate verification of authorization such driving license. That's all from my side.
Thank you. So now, Hugo, would you like to say something about balancing innovation and public interest and
Okay, thank you.
sustainability?
I think we don't want to tell the companies how to run their businesses. We don't want to, we don't have to. Of course, they must comply with several rules. There are main rules with flexibility in some cases to comply with those rules. We don't want to have their algorithms. We don't want to design their algorithms. We just want to be transparent. They must comply with some rules. They have to give us data to comparing to monitoring the market. So the companies know where to invest, how to invest, and to secure their place in the market, in a free market. If they don't invest, if they don't evolve, they are off the market. If they comply with several rules, if they invest and they evolve, they can secure their place and to get more consumers. For our part, we just want to ensure transparency, compliance. We don't want a legal framework that establish and defines everything in a centimeter. They must comply, and then I think that's the way to ensure balance between supervision and the market involvement and investment. And that's it.
Thank you. So I would like to thank all the speakers of the first panel for your insights and the fruitful discussion. We will now take a short 10-minute break. Please note that on the program, all the times are in Central European time, so 1 hour ahead of local time in Lisbon. So for this break, we will be back at 10 a.m., 10:10, which is 11:10 in CET. Okay, so we'll see you in 10 minutes. Please stay connected. Do not leave the meeting. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you. We will now move on to the second panel, which will address how complaints are handled in the ride-hailing sector. We will hear from regulators, platforms, and consumer protection bodies. And the speakers in this panel are Laura Ozolina from the Road Transport Administration in Latvia, Mário de Moraes from Bolt, Paulo Fonseca from the Portuguese Consumer Protection Association, DECO, Francisco Vilaça from Uber, and Susana Batista and Raquel Cipriano from the Directorate of Supervision at AMT. Laura, please, you can start.
Yeah, hi everyone. I will share my screen. No. Wait, sorry. I lost my presentation. Where is it? So hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here with you. A special hi to my colleague Ania, who has the opportunity to visit Lisbon. My name is Laura Ozolina. I'm Deputy Head of Licensing Department at the Road Transport Administration of Latvia. And I will begin with a quick overview of our role in this today's topic. Since year 2020, we have been performing registration of service providers for ride-hailing services in Latvia, And our role is also to monitor compliance with the regulation, and that includes also conducting monitoring rides if needed. So, and if a provider is found to be non-compliant, we issue a formal request to correct the issue. And if the provider fails to do so, their registration can be withdrawn. And to clarify, we are not the institution directly to be responsible for passenger complaints, but we often act as an intermediary because passengers frequently perceive us as the authority overseeing all aspects of ride-hailing platforms. So we receive a lot of emails, calls, and information from general situation in the market. And we become involved in guiding passengers towards the appropriate approach and channel to resolve their problems. Yeah, and in cooperation with Ministry of Transport, we also think about possible solutions that involves amendments to regulation. Speaking of the market in Latvia, it currently consists of 6 mobile application service providers, Bolt, which is in dominant position, and 2 other Estonian brands, Forest and Mobi, and 3 new local companies that pioneer in the market just now, X-Taxi, Kak-Taxi, and Root. They just in last 2 months were registered, and we will see if they gain their share of the market. And as for now, we have more than 5,500 drivers registered in the taxi driver register. This is the function we also perform in Road Transport Administration, and we check the drivers for their different aspects, language proficiency and penalties, and driving bans and driving license requirements. We also have 3,500 licensed carriers offering commercial passenger transport services using light passenger cars. It must be noted that majority of those service providers are small companies. As Anja told, we have only companies possible to work with those mobile application providers, and they are typically operating with just 1 or maximum few vehicles. This figure excludes taxi companies because they receive their licenses from local municipalities rather than Road Transport Administration. So I am unable to provide the complete number of those who can operate through ride-hailing apps. In year 2024, there were organized more than 9 million trips in Latvia. We know that because after each trip, the application needs to send data to State Revenue Service, so we know what's happening in the real time. And notably that 98% of those trips were carried by Bolt, highlighting its dominant position in the market. And of course, this level of concentration raises important questions about competition, pricing, and the balance in the market. And it's also gives a lot of challenges in Latvian market. Speaking of complaints, in most cases, complaints are resolved directly between parties involved, passengers, drivers, carriers, which always are licensed carriers, and companies, and mobile application service providers. If the resolution can't be reached, passengers turn to Consumer Right Protection Center. It is when they complain about Latvian companies, and European Consumer Center if they complain about foreign companies. In our case, it's 3 Estonian brands. And Carriers and mobile application service providers share their joint liability in providing service. Yeah, both have set of rules to follow, and that also presents challenges because in practice, mobile application service providers kind of lead the operational processes. So, and carriers in Latvia, they lack representation and unified voice. So, their ability to stand up for their interests are limited. As I mentioned before, a majority of complaints we hear and receive fall outside of the scope of our legal responsibilities, which are limited to registration matters only, and that mostly include obligations for specific functions of application and information displayed in the apps, and making sure licensed carriers, vehicles, and drivers perform their rides, and information is sent to State Revenue Service for every ride after finishing it. And a lot of other disagreements are governed by private agreements between the client and the application, or the carrier and the application. Speaking about passenger complaints, we received feedback highlighting the lack of accessible vehicles for passengers in wheelchairs, and the lack of vehicles equipped with small child seats for small children. At present, our regulatory states only that a foldable wheelchair must fit into luggage department of the car, and but the client demand is to be able also for people in the wheelchair to drive inside the car without sitting in the car seats. So it is needed for a specially equipped vehicle with a ramp. And we have communicated this need to ride-hailing apps and carriers, and companies expressed their interest in offering such vehicles. But the problem is lack of investment in the carrier side. And that is the problem to this day. Also, we have been hearing the cases where rides are carried out by someone else rather than registered driver. This, of course, raises serious safety concerns, and passengers also express dissatisfaction with the age of vehicles sometimes, and price range. And there have been few cases of double charge and lost items in the car, which they cannot get back. As I mentioned, 98% of the trips in Latvia last year were made by Bolt, and many carriers reported feeling trapped as other apps generate little or no demand, so they feel compelled to accept conditions set by Bolt and use their services, regardless to whether those terms are favorable to them. Another thing, we hear that when Russia-Ukraine war started, Latvia introduced an exception to official language requirements for Ukrainians wishing to work as a taxi drivers. This measure was intended as temporary solution, allowing those persons to access employment more easily. However, as the conflict continued for an extended period, local drivers complained that they feel that this creates an unequal situation in the market. One of the ongoing issues we deal right now in cooperation with Ministry of Transport is incorrect use of taximeters in taxi services. The thing is, application must offer a payment method based on the fare calculated by a taximeter if the taxi is using application, because both carriers, taxi carriers and the ones we license in Road Transport Administration can use applications to work. And on the other hand, taxi drivers are obliged to collect the fare calculated by a taximeter. There are cases where drivers either do not activate the taximeter or switch it off once the fare reaches the app's estimated amount. And this is the example of joint liability because both parties need to meet the legal requirements about this payment. But most apps, including Bolt, lack of technical solution to support that the payment can be taken by taximeter and or check if the driver does something incorrect with the taximeter. So instead, they estimate the fare using GPS data, which is, on the other hand, what passenger needs. And another concern is operation of websites and mobile apps that appear to fall outside of this scope of regulation. And we have such in market. These platforms offer passenger transport services referred to transfer services. Maybe you know such applications like Get Transfer. And these services sometimes resemble taxi services, and they create confusion between carriers, control bodies, and other platforms, whether they need or do not need to register in Road Transport Administration. So regarding all those issues explained, we are working in cooperation with Transport Ministry and other institutions to tackle all those challenges, hopefully to ensure legal consistency and fair competition in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for your presentation on complaints related to ride-hailing services in Latvia. We will now give word to Mário de Moraes from Bolt. Mário.
Hello. Let me just make sure that I can share my screen. So hopefully you are already seeing it. So
yes, we can see it.
Thank you, Sophia. The idea today is for me to talk about three major components on this consumer satisfaction in ride-hailing. The first one being the famous pricing algorithm, okay, that raises lots of questions and dreams. And I like the fact that Google just told us some minutes ago that they don't want to make the algorithm, which is a good thing. Quite hard, so you probably need some more people as well in the regulator. The second one will be a bit about our interaction with the regulator and how we are improving our user experience in the app. And the third about the process of complaints and how are we managing and learning from it. So from the start, the pricing algorithm, the major purpose of this algorithm is actually to give transparency to both sides of the marketplace about the ride happening, right? So it's about giving the right price to the driver, the right price to the consumer, and making sure that everyone knows what they are getting and they have an expectation that can be fulfilled. People don't like big changes, as we know. So the algorithm tries to make sure that these changes are as smooth as possible. Second point is to establish a baseline. So when we have the algorithm, we have components, we have calculations, we try to have a stable baseline for the mobility usage, mostly here for the shared mobility. And this will always include the time that both driver and rider spend, as well as the uses of the asset, in this case, cars. And finally, it's to try to build an equilibrium between what people want, which is a great service at a great price, and what the drivers want, that is good earnings, okay, and a fair service that they can provide. So that's the baseline for our algorithm. If we move further, okay, how does this help the market? So first thing is we try to get the best price possible within the range of category that the consumer chose. And we estimate this with distance and time for pickup for the ride itself. Okay, and this is where our technology enters and probably our competition as well. And we try to make sure that we have the best estimates of pickup, drop off, and that people can actually manage their expectations. Then on top of that, and to provide, and it's always interconnected, to provide a good service to the rider, to the client, we need to make sure that the driver also has a fair part of this value chain. And we need to minimize the cost that it takes to make a certain trip. So that's the algorithm calculating the best routes possible and make sure that the pickup is the fastest possible, okay? Of course, then we enter on second derivatives here that is about who is the driver that is accepting. In an ideal world, we provide the perfect price for the driver and rider and everyone accepts at first. Reality tells us that is a bit different, okay? So both the rider tries to choose different options as the driver will not accept all the trips that are proposed to them. Okay, and our challenge to build a better algorithm is to make this rejection as small as possible to actually maximize customer experience. And then the major idea is that most of the drivers are available when clients need it, and we can actually, with the algorithm, guide them towards the needs of the market. Again, in big terms, this is the purpose of our development. Of course, there are lots of variables and technology involved here, but I think we are getting to better and better places. And maybe some days we'll have other technological solutions to provide this. The second part, which is very interesting, is about our app user experience, okay, and what is changing and what is changing because we think it's better for the client, and also what is changing because the regulator makes some requests or some ideas for us, and we take it very seriously. So things that, at least in Portugal, regulators and AMT in this case have asked for. So all the information about the route available for both client and rider and service provider, information about the earnings and the pricing details. So we have, as Hugo mentioned before, a very specific law that defines quite some topics that need to be on the information side. And this is not common across all countries, not even in Europe. So as a global platform, we needed to adapt to some asks from the regulator, and also information about who is providing the service. Again, and referring to Hugo's presentation, we have a three-party model platform, TVD, company, and driver. So we need to make sure that we can make the client ask for the service provider, the company, for information and knows who is the driver. With all that in mind, we start adding more information to each trip request for the client. So he knows what he's paying for. It's clear what are the components in terms of distance, time, dynamic pricing, okay? And it's also clear who is providing the service, not only the driver itself, okay, and the vehicle, but also the company behind the service. And these are all add-ons that came from, I would say, Portuguese specific legislation that I actually think it makes a lot of sense, okay, to provide as much information to the client as possible, because otherwise you will generate lots of complaints that is more about knowing than actually problems that happen in the market. And finally, with all this in mind, we actually provide proper channels to complain within the app and the follow-up that the company has to do. And this actually links to our third point here, which is the customer complaints. So I divided in 3 layers, okay? There is always a first layer that is our in-app, our emails, our customer support channels, okay? So both riders and drivers will complain on these channels, and they want to have some sort of answer, clarification for their cases. And here, what we do is we try to have the best customer support as possible. Of course, we all know that today automation and artificial intelligence helps a lot on this fast response, but we have, of course, a human layer behind it making sure that customers get the proper response. And hopefully this should have stopped in the first layer, okay, if we have a perfect service that we are aiming for. And here, what our focus is, fast time, clear solution for the client. If this happens, at least we actually fill the first layer. And I think this is where 99% of complaints go to die in a way. So they end up here. Then there is a second layer. And the second layer is going through the regulator or the complaints book or wherever the client chooses as a second point, okay, maybe an association like DECO or other similar, okay. And here we have to do several things. So first thing, and this is the work that we are doing also with the regulator and with the associations, is understanding, okay, is it a fair complaint in the sense that was it answered before or not? Okay, does it have kind of a baseline to keep on pursuing it? If no, we can again explain again to the customer what happened or what are the conditions, and of course inform the regulator, okay, what happened and that we have already answered this before, so no need to pursue further. We have to remember that we live in a world with lots of different perceptions, lots of information being kind of thrown to people that get overwhelmed with it. So sometimes complaints don't even relate to something that happened on the service. It's just a perception that I have. So we need to make sure that we clear those out. And then there are some complaints that need further assessment, either because there was a human mistake, there was a process that was not followed. And here it's very important that we provide clarity and that we show, and this is our task every day, to the regulator that we are compliant. And this led to our third layer, that was the layer of improvements. So, and I think there are 3 improvements to be made. One is on our side platform. Okay, so we need to make better process, faster processes. We need to make sure that the regulator is aligned with our line of thought and we are complying with every law, but also on the driver and client side. So drivers and clients that complain, and here let's focus on clients, they need to understand why are we answering in a way, okay, or why are we giving that solution to their complaint. And of course, if the regulator approves it after the second layer, it's because we are good. And with that, we need to educate people around how does this work? How can they reach a faster solution for their problem? The worst thing in all this process is that you get stuck for days or for weeks with something that is bothering you. It makes you go away from shared mobility solutions. It makes you probably drive the car again. And this is a loop that we don't want to enter. Actually, we want to enter the opposite loop. The good point is, and from the last reports that I read from the regulator, and of course, estimating my competitor size that I don't know, unfortunately, I can say that we have very few complaints by millions of trips, which is kind of a very good news for the sector in Portugal. Still, I think we need to improve processes, probably share even more information. We started to do it with the other part of the regulation, the IMT, but we should aim to provide more information so we can actually educate clients better. And when they have to complain, they go straight to the right entities and the right authorities. And that was it for my side.
Thank you, Mario, for your presentation on Bulk's perspective on customer satisfaction. So now we give word to Paulo Fonseca from the Portuguese Consumer Protection Association, DECO. Paulo.
Thank you so much. Let me check if I can share my presentation. I'm going to the beginning, and I hope that you're seeing it correctly. Thank you very much.
Can you just put it in slideshow mode, please?
I already put it. I think I already put it.
Oh, okay. So maybe it's me that's not seeing it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, thanks so much. My name is Paulo Fonseca. I'm the strategic advisor and public affairs of DECO, a consumer organization. And my presentation will be on three main aspects. The first one is just an introduction of my organization. I'm not sure if everyone is aware of what we do as a consumer organization, especially for those in the countries. And the second part is, of course, the complaint handling system that we have related to the complaints that we received by consumers, and in specifically in terms of the ride-hailing services, what are the aspects and the complaints that we received, and finally the gaps and the challenges that we face ahead in terms of consumer protection for the future. So giving just a brief overview of my organization, we are a consumer organization. We are a non-profit organization. We were founded in 1974. We are a little bit old, but wiser. Nowadays, we have more than 278,000 members, all of them singular persons, or it means consumers. But it doesn't mean that we only work for these consumers. We work for all consumers, not only our members, because we are an organization with public utility. And where can you reach us? You can reach us by several ways and by several instruments. You can use the email, you can use a WhatsApp line, you can use a hotline, you can even use our website, but you can reach us physically. We have like 88 local contact points, either through our regional offices and our premises in Lisbon, but also based on cooperation agreements that we have with municipalities. We provide information and support to consumers at local level. So you have a lot of ways to contact us. We are
Paulo, I'm sorry for interrupting you. Are you on the first slide? Are you on the title slide?
No.
So maybe you're sharing not the screen which we are seeing, because we are seeing your first slide.
And share again. So let me check if. Are you seeing now?
We are seeing. No, I don't think we are seeing the one which you have.
Let me check if I can share my screen. I think it's better if I can share my screen. Okay, so are you seeing now?
Yes, now we are seeing.
Okay. And
Thank
do you
so
see
much.
me moving the slides? Okay. We are also social partners, so we are represented in more than 100 bodies, which means that at international level, we are, for example, part of or members of the Consumer Policy Advisory Group of the European Commission. And at national level, we are part and members of the Social Economic Council. So it means that you can see the average of representation that we have. We are also a member of umbrella organizations and international organizations. I can name you a few, just BILC and Consumers International. In terms of areas and how we are organized in terms of the services that we provide, I think we have 7 main areas that we do. One of us, it's of course information. It's our core service from our organization, information that we provide individually to consumers, but also collectively through our campaigns, through our magazines and publications in our websites, and publications are physical publications. We also conduct education and training process. In terms of education, we have a very good network with schools. We have more than 3,000 schools in our network that includes students, teachers, and even universities. And we also provide training, not only to consumers through local communities, but also to companies. We have specific projects that are designed for companies. Just to give you an example, we have the Consumer Already, which is a project that's financed by the European Commission, in which we provide training on consumer protection issues, and that is dedicated to small and medium enterprises. And in terms of enforcement, we also work as an enforcers, either by public enforcement through the cooperation with national regulatory authorities, but also in terms of private enforcement, either through ADR bodies, as I'm going to explain a little bit later, but also in terms of collective redress. So we can use it because in Portugal, we do have an opt-out system that, and given that we have the legitimacy, we are considered a qualified entity, we can reach court in order to represent all the consumers that are involved in a specific situation. And we also represent consumers, as I mentioned, and we work in advocacy. So this means that we are lobbyists in a good way, but we try to promote and engage the authorities and all the political deciders in terms of what the role that we want to do in consumer protection, what are the consumer needs for the future. And we also cooperate, and cooperation is a clear principle for us, not only in terms of public authorities, but also in terms of companies. We cooperate with companies. We have a very good network of privileged contacts. We have more than 100 contacts with companies. That means that we can reach to a company, we can find the support for the company in terms to solve the complaint or the issue. And speaking of assistance and support, that is something that we provide individually to consumers, not only our members, but other consumers. And this assistance is conducted by a consumer support office, in which, just to give an example, in 2024, we received more than 330,000 complaints. Let me assure you that mobility and ride-hailing services are not the most complained sector, of course, because we deal with other sectors like electronic communications, energy, financial services, housing. But when it comes to mobility, of course, ride-hailing services are on the top in terms of the complaints that we receive, but I will explain a little bit later. So we have like 5 words for our complaint system. So we provide advice. We also use the word recommendation because we try to recommend solutions not only to consumers, but also to companies in order to solve the dispute. This is something that we do have that, for example, a regulator, a national regulatory authority doesn't have, or even an ADR body, which is a power to sit together, the company and the consumer, and try to find an amicable solution that goes outside what we call the mediation, the conciliation, arbitration procedures of an ADR body, or even the intervention of a national regulatory authority. So we also try to negotiate and find these amicable solutions, but if not possible, we always try to assist the consumers. And how does it work in practice? We have the consumer journey, and the consumer journey begins, of course, with the complaint that we received by the consumer. And is a complaint. Based on the complaint that we receive, we decide jointly with the consumer what would be the next steps, on the next procedures are we going to use. We can either try to find a negotiation, which is intermediation that we do with the company, in which we try to reach the company in order to find a solution, to get the previous answer from the company, try to find what is the best possible solution. Of course, if it's a legal situation, of course, they have to comply with the consumer rights and what the consumer and what is legal at stake. But we try to find this solution with the companies. I think it's a good practice that we have shared with companies. Until now, we have proved to be very successful. When it comes to enforcement, we always try to provide, and sometimes there is a combination of when we try to negotiate, but there is an infringement of the consumer law, and we try to enforce it either through forwarding the complaint to a national regulatory body, but also to an ADR system, if that's the specific situation. And if we are in the situation to forward the complaint to an ADR body, just to give an example, we are members of almost the majority of the ADR bodies, which means that we are part of the administration bodies, but we also represent consumers and assist consumers in this specific ADR body. So we can begin the journey through the complaint, we can assist through the complaint, the negotiation process, and we can also end with the decision by an ADR body and still continue to assist the consumer. And also there is another work and another layer that we have recently introduced with companies, which is compliance. Sometimes when there is a complaint, and I think there is a problem of knowledge and a problem of literacy by the company, we try to embark in a compliance system with the company, try to make them understand what is a consumer protection law, because it's a very complex system, try to introduce what could be a best practice for the companies, because that's what we want in the future. And in the end, that is consumers satisfied and have trust in their own business practices. And the results are there. So we can have 3 kinds of results. One is a solution, of course, which is something that is good and good for the business because it has a consumer business and gains a consumer and business value. Another one is an agreement. There could be situations when we try to sit together, the consumer and the business side and the professional. So we try to reach a compromise solution between both of them. I think you are thinking that it is a very time consuming, but it's very quick and you try to use the automatic ways as soon as possible because we want to try to find a solution and a very quick solution for consumer. And there is a situation of refusal. And in this situation of refusal, of course, we have to forward to the ADR body and we can continue to assist the consumer in this ADR body, as I mentioned. So I think that in the end, I think this works as a trust mark for consumers and businesses. It is also important to avoid and prevent unfair practices, and it's important to identify solutions to consumers. I think one of the major assets that we can get with this kind of relationship with companies is that we can learn with the consumer, but we can also learn with the company, because sometimes sitting together with the company, we can understand the problems and the issues that are at stake. And even for our advocacy work, we can try to understand how can we create a safeguard system that protects consumers and at the same time establishes the balance between the business and consumers. And that's the way to resolve gaps and bad disruptive behaviors. So coming into these ride-hailing services in concrete, and giving the majority of services and all of the services that we provide, one of the services, because we like to work with consumers and we like to work with our members, sometimes we conduct a kind of focus group on limited groups with consumers in which we try to understand what are their expectations and needs, what are the trends in terms of the market, why do they use this kind of service. And we did this in the beginning of the disruptive model in terms of ride-hailing services to understand what were the consumer's perspective when they were reaching and looking into this new service. It was really disruptive at the time. So the first thing was, of course, these are the sentences and the phrases and the words that were used by consumers when trying to describe ride-hailing services and why they are using the word they're using these services. One of this was, of course, the major one was the lower prices. Just to remind you that in 2016-17, when, for example, the first platform was emerging in this market with a ride-hailing service, it was presented like something that was with a lower price regarding another fares, not only regarding the individual costs by using our individual vehicles, but also in terms of comparison with other services very similar like taxis. So lower prices were one of the issues that were mentioned by consumers as a motive to conduct and embark in this kind of ride-hailing service and to download the app. So cost savings, lower transaction costs, affordable fares, transparency. Consumers evaluated transparency as the right to have the information about the price, the total price in the beginning of the journey and not in the end, because there was a kind of mistrust of consumers when they're using taxi services because they were not aware of the price they're going to charge, even fraudulent schemes. So being aware of the price immediately before the journey and deciding the journey, that would be very interesting and very important for the consumer. And also in terms of convenience, it was really an important word. It was cited several times by consumers. So easy booking, practicality, suitability, the payment methods that were more easy for the consumer. Consumers wanted to have the car to reach their own household immediately when they downloaded the app and opened the app to ask for a driver. So that could be the idea of convenience, to understand how much time would they take to go to another place. So this could be easy for consumers. And also in terms of innovation and trends, I would add trends to this kind of, or to this product, because when they were downloading Uber app, for example, in the beginning, everyone wanted to have this kind of app to experience that. So this was related to the new products and new business models that would be integrated in practice. So consumers wanted to experience that. And also service quality. So experience, customization, comfort. I remember that consumers in the beginning mentioned that the driver was asking if everything was okay. They were providing some beverages and water, for example, for the consumer, for the passenger. And that was something very interesting because they thought that they were being treated differently, and this add quality to the service and interest in continuing to use the service. So the experience, the customization, the fact that they related to their own personal experiences, even the GPS tracking and the real-time updates. So it was important to understand how the system was providing the service, and at the same time understanding what the service was, and the responsiveness. And this was something in the beginning, the idea that if they had a problem, they immediately would have a response by the platform themselves. That's not to say that we are still in the same standards, but in the beginning, that was the idea and the expectation of consumers. Also in terms of safety, because they thought they were leaving the market of taxis, for example, and this market was a little bit tired in terms of safety. There were some questions about the vehicles and its functioning, its safety procedures. And so they were interesting on that. to understand what is a new vehicle. However, they were also questioning and concerned about their privacy and data protection. This was a time of discussion of the GDPR, so it was interesting to understand how consumers were facing with privacy issues and also sustainability. We mustn't forget that these platforms emerged based on the ideas of sharing economy. We were discussing carpooling, sharing economies and sharing services, and also in terms of environment, sustainability, social concern. So this is something that was also interesting for consumers. For this was all the expectations that consumers had at the time. But we wanted to understand how it was in practice, and let me relate to the complaints that we received. So in terms of complaints, I think the scenario nowadays is a little bit different. Of course, that these are the main issues in terms of complaints. I'm not going to speak about the first ones because I think that the first ones will be mentioned and are already mentioned in the supervisory reports, the reports of the supervisory authority. But also I would like to focus on something that is clearly important. And I was listening very carefully to the presentation of my colleague from Bolt. And it's interesting that there is this interest in trying to solve the complaints and trying to improve the complaint system, because this is one of the main aspects that consumers complain, which is no accessible or clear contact channels for complaints. I note that it is important and cost saving to introduce automated systems in terms of complaint. But let me just say that consumers find having to discuss an issue or complain with chatbot very annoying. So that's not a point for a consumer. And also difficulties in reaching customer support or assistance services. That is something that is very, that we receive more and more complaints about it. Probably you mentioned that, you all mentioned, those of you who have platforms mentioned that you do receive a very low margin in terms of complaints, but that's because consumers, sometimes it's very difficult for them to find the complaint button. So I think instead of saying that this is not happening in the market is not offering problems for the consumers, we should say that maybe we should improve our complaint systems, and afterwards we will see if that is the segment, it's a system that is maintaining. And at the same time, there is also another issues. One of the facts is drivers cancelling rides in advance without justification. This was also mentioned in the report. It's also questionable if it's really a refusal or not of the service, if it's legal or illegal. And also unauthorized billing. I remember one of the complaints that mentioned the inclusion of a specific fee regarding for a cleaning of the vehicle. So this is something, unexpected fees that are constantly appearing in the billing. So this is a major issue that should be also taken into account. Also excessively long waiting times for pickup. This was also mentioned in reports. So I'm not going to work on this nowadays, but also the exaggeration of cars. There was this example. I think that there are some reports from other countries that also mentioned this example of what we call the phantom cars appearing. There are a lot of cars available in the beginning of the request, but after the request, they all disappear and consumers have to wait for a long time to wait for their drivers. So this is an issue that is also important to understand. And of course, the safety and poor quality service nowadays that we have. Remember the expectations, but these are the results. Poor driving, problems regarding the GPS orientation, also the condition of the vehicles. The language is also a problem. I know that has been discussed several times. Let me remind you that when we are discussing the use of several languages, regarding the service that is being provided to the consumer, one of the issues is that based on the consumer rights law, the Portuguese consumer rights law, Portuguese have a right to information in their own language, which means in Portuguese. So every time a company is providing the service, this means that they should make available the Portuguese language to the consumer. So this is an important issue also for consumers. Of course, that in terms of disruptive ways, we can find a way so that consumers can choose, for example, another language, or for example, using English. Maybe it could be interesting for the consumer, but all the drivers should always provide information in Portuguese or be available to provide information in Portuguese. Don't forget that we are dealing with the service provision, and the service provision are provided in a in a very complex system, but we do have the operator, and this operator and even the platform is liable in terms of the consumer, so it's their service, so they need to provide in Portuguese. So in terms of complaints, we can see that since 2021, we have assisted to a 40% increase. So the most problematic issue was, of course, service quality, price, and waiting times. And there was some situations where the consumers found that they were locked inside the vehicle against their will. And we can see that there is a more and more user dissatisfaction. So we need to take that into account. But despite all the complaints, there are also challenges, and there are legal challenges. And I remember that we are working on an ecosystem, on a digital ecosystem. And there is a clear uncertainty about this market. For example, it's not very clear if, for example, these kind of platforms are really intermediation services or hosting services or transportation services. So this is important because it could be whether the Digital Services Act is applicable or at least partially applicable, or even the Digital Markets Act, because we could have a situation if this is an intermediation services, and I think that according to the DCG rule, this was not the case, but they could be considered a gatekeeper. And if it is a gatekeeper, there are competition rules that need to be applied. And there are also issues about the platform liability in terms of data protection, the location, the use of biometric data that is raising more and more concerns, profiling and automated decision-making, and even in terms of AI systems that are being introduced. There are questions for the future in terms of pricing, of matching drivers and users, and even social scoring. Don't forget that if there is a rating for the driver and there is a possibility, not in Portugal anymore given the legislation, but that is something that is up to discussion in the future, and even on other member states, this is a possibility for the company itself to classify or to provide a social scoring of the consumer. So this could be a little bit menacing, given that there are several restrictions in terms of the AI Act and in terms of the future. And even the services themselves, if we're discussing traffic, for example, they could create or embark in a gray area of the AI systems regulation in terms of the AI Act, or especially in high-risk systems. So it is important to be very clear and transparent what are the legal bases and what is the nature of these services. And at the same time, in terms of consumer protection, yes?
I'm going to ask you to wrap up your presentation
Okay,
as soon as possible so that everyone gets some time.
Okay, you mentioned 25 minutes. I'm 22, but I will go there. So in terms of consumer protection framework and national framework, there are already some problems and challenges that we are facing nowadays. Some of them are the report. We do want to ensure automatic compensation for damages. I think we need to improve the cooperation between national regulatory authorities. We need to prevent abusive and discriminatory practices. And we also need to discuss the problems of the dynamic price. So I will go, because the enforcement gaps probably will be discussed by my colleagues. But I will go directly to the challenges that we face in the future. One of them is the dynamic pricing. We are discussing dynamic pricing nowadays in all the digital market. And personalization is clearly important, specifically when we are dealing with platforms. They are linked to multi-service platforms that includes food delivery, mobility, and tourism. So there is a risk of price discrimination for consumers, but also automation, consumer interaction, and also the market regulation, also environment, the extensive tracking of drivers and riders, also issues in terms of privacy, data security, and ethical concerns. These are discussions that should be taken also in terms of this ride-hailing services at the same time. And in the end, what we want is to enhance the customer experience, and we do need to work better with the platforms. I think it's good if consumers can go to our platform, to our services, but sometimes we don't even receive answers from the online platforms. So I think it's important to promote more agile cooperation mechanisms between these platforms and consumer organizations, because in the end, what we do, and we want to ensure that the mobility could be considered as a service. So I think more and more we need to be working in an integrated way. So we do think that ride-hailing services are clearly important for consumers. There is space for improvement, but there is also a lot of potential for consumers and even for businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo, for your presentation on the contribution of DECO to the protection of consumers, in particular in the ride-hailing sector. So now we move on to Francisco Vilaça from Uber. Francisco.
Apologies, I was trying to connect via the room. And if it's possible for you to enable Caparica to speak, that would help me if it's possible. Well,
So
never mind. I will present here. And it's
we have already given the Caparica person speaking and sharing privileges. Can you now share your presentation and turn on your camera?
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. We can see your presentation, but it's not in slideshow mode.
Now it is.
Okay. We cannot see you, however.
Let me, because I have. Okay. I was using the.
Oh, now we can see you.
Perfect.
And we can see your presentation. Thank you. So go for it.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Thank you very much to all of the Sophia and the esteemed AMT members and fellow panelists. So I'm here to present you today our view around how we perform customer support, both on the driver side, fleet partner side, and user side. And this comes in a world where mobility has gone through a significant transformation, which has obviously led to immense pressure on regulators, immense pressure on continuous innovation, and the ability of platforms, in our case, to maintain safety, quality, and compliance at very high standards as society does require. When we speak about support, at Uber, we call its community operations, and this is the central nervous system of our company that monitors, maintains, and improves service quality across the board, all the while ensuring that we comply and across the board in this massive ecosystem. So let me just give you a very brief overview. So this comes obviously at a very large scale, operating in more than 15,000 cities across 70 countries and 6 continents, requires the ability to balance our ability to obviously comply with potentially 70 to thousands of different regulations, all the while balancing a uniform, relatable, quality level for users across those countries. Tourists that come from all countries to Portugal, Portuguese users who use us in all of those 70 countries. This is a technology-enabled organization. It's impossible to do this in and be smooth and efficient in highly manual processes. And the long-term vision is radically efficient. Why? Because this also feeds back into users, into operators, because we lower the cost of providing that support, which is a trade-off. How can we provide thousands of interactions at the lowest and cost possible, the highest quality possible, all the while keeping the equation feasible for everyone? The community operations team does operate across the board 24/7 in the world, from first interactions that are self-serve so that users can solve their own problem easily, to highly complex cases that need the intervention of highly specialized team members, all the way to safety incidents that require 24/7 support, phone support immediate action and the ability to investigate all of those issues. So that's why we have built all throughout these years, now more than 15 years of existence, multi-layered, multi-channel support in order to be able to comply to that requirement from the consumers. And we have, as I mentioned, the first level of service, which is the ability to automatically, very quickly solve the vast majority of issues. And these inbounds are typically resolved instantly within seconds. There are app inflows such as that do not require human interaction, such as a question around the fair review that needs to be automatically based on data that is easy to solve. Then you have core support, that is a network that is globally integrated, that has multilingual coverage, the ability to have answering users of all these 70 countries that share different nationalities and different idioms. And then obviously the last layer of support, that is the critical support team that is able to, with a very specific background, very specific training, able to provide such support in more delicate interactions, as well as then with authorities such as criminal investigation authorities. We also have in-person support centers such as our green light hubs that provides service to our fleet partners and drivers mainly in the first stages of their interaction with the app, when onboarding, when trying to start driving, as well as the regulatory compliance in some instances. So scale is important. I think one of the important points that I've wanted to mention is that having 180 million monthly active users on a platform requires the ability to balance how to provide us a support that is efficient with a cost that is feasible, that then flows back into the service. So without technology, those consumers would have to be able to choose between having a terrible service with no support or a very expensive service with a highly curated support in real time. And that's a trade-off that users clearly tell us that they want the right support in the right moment and the best prices possible in their services. So I'll give you a very basic example. A phone call support is multiples of the cost of a trip in terms of providing that support. It still exists. It exists for where it needs to exist, but if it existed for every trip, it would become unfeasible. That is why automation and advances in technology are key to be able to continue providing this highly curated, highly effective and quality-based support. And obviously, feedback loops need to exist. That's why in this huge business unit within Uber is able to take back the learnings where we failed, where we did not provide the best service, feedback into improving our processes, our app, and our agents training as well, in order to be able to improve and always increase our level of service. This is, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands from the very basic to the highly complex interactions that come daily and need to be able to, that the platform needs to adapt for all of those. All the way to very basic problems that are quite common, such as a lost item, where probably one of the few industries where you are able to be able to find your lost item through technology and connecting with the real world with the driver then that can deliver to you or to a police station effectively. So what is our long-term vision and goal? It's 0 or 1. And what does this mean? So 0 is leveraging all of the insights that we get from the support teams, from all of these interactions, to be able to allow incidents do not happen. So if we fix problems before they happen, that's the vision, so that a user, a consumer, a driver does not have those problems to start with, so that they don't need support for such problems. That is the basic groundwork that our customer support vision starts with. The one is then, whenever this is not possible, we're talking about a highly dynamic industry where millions of users, thousands of drivers interact per second, and new situations outrise permanently. And these teams need to learn, identify the trends, and be able to solve for that. But the one is being able to solve one issue in one goal, the ability to avoid the ping pong of interactions, which is part of delivering the best quality support. And so, looking ahead, we do believe that support, high quality support, will have to balance the human intelligence, the human touch, the human empathy with technology, generative AI powered features that allow us to strike the best balance between quality, cost, and consistency throughout. And then, last but not least, what do users consider quality? I think this is something that our fellow colleague from DECO very well pointed out, that users define quality as having a highly reliable service, having a trip where they need, at an accessible price point, in order to be democratically accessible by all, with an industry that is sustainable and provides the opportunity for multiple companies to strive, to grow, and to continue growing their fleets, which is something that we have been seeing. So platforms, how do platforms, and I'll speak for ourselves, how do we operate? So we aim to create the ability to provide multiple offers, so multiple options. So users have, in a portfolio of options, what they need, and they will know how much to pay from the start. So if you select the economical option of UberX, or if you want to a more curated experience in Uber Black, or you want to wait more because you are able to travel later at the lower price, those are things that the user has the potential and the ability to choose. The key one that I would also want to highlight here is, that was briefly also covered, was the complexity of being able to sustain through technology all of the compliance behind all of this. So driver compliance and fleet partner compliance. We process thousands of documents daily, all the way from driver licenses, TVD licenses of drivers, criminal records that then are cross-checked with governmental platforms, plus vehicle documents, enormous array of documents that are processed in Portuguese and then cross-checked with governmental platforms, which is a key differentiator that Portugal has, which is having the ability to actually not only add our level of technology to verify that a document is legitimate, but also then further enhancing that ability by cross-checking with governmental platforms, which allow us to be able to very confidently verify compliance of platform access. So driver vetting is something that we very, very consistently invest on. The platform with the IMT recently is a very good example of adding on top of all of our visual verification of our technology to verify tampering of images, the ability to check that an array of documents are valid and consistent. And so we have been pioneering this because safety and compliance access is key also for trust in the ecosystem, so that users see not only this as an accessible low price solution for their mobility that then they can complement with public transit to leave their car altogether at home or no longer have a car, But so trust is key. And so having pioneered facial recognition back in 2019, and then multiple other safety features, we do believe that it's by reinvesting all of that efficiency into developing further better technology to create the safest solution of mobility in urban settings possible, that we will be able to continue growing and be able to help society in reducing the dependency on individual vehicles everywhere in the world. And we do believe that we have been striking a very good evolution here. So driver quality has been rated at very high levels in Portugal. We're talking about above 4.9 out of 5. And this is a testament of the ability to deliver the best experience, have drivers also improve in their service, and be able to then, along with fleet partners, deliver the best solutions to the society. Indeed, some trips have issues. Those happen, and that's why the ComOps entity exists behind. And I would like to finalize with transparency. And transparency is a core piece of what has actually led us to, in the early days, delivering a highly differentiated service. The ability to know the price upfront when selecting a trip. And that has been key, is still key, and will continue being key for the foreseeable. We do believe that this is a part that is ingrained in the DNA of this industry. And in that creates then the relevance of having core mechanisms of pricing that create the ability of having that reliability that is key for a user to know that if they're going to a place where there is no demand, they have the same access to service than someone who is going to the downtown center of a city where a lot of new other demand exists. And this is key for balancing reliability of a service and non-discrimination of depending on where you're going. So dynamic pricing to that is key to deliver that ability to service both fleet partners and drivers with efficient, highly accessible and attractive offers, but also for users to be able to travel everywhere and get a trip when they need to travel. Without flexible pricing, and market's experience would be highly inefficient. We'll be facing long wait times, cancellations, underutilization of driver capacity, and we have seen that happening in multiple markets at some point in time, which then is obviously a deterioration for a net loss for the entire system, because people then will need to request a different mode of transport, and the personal car is at the top of options, then driving a highly inefficient mobility solution, which relies on something that stays 95% of the time idle, occupying space, plus then congesting all the roadways in the peak times when everyone is trying to move. So we also, research is very clear in showing that dynamic pricing helps increase availability in underserved or remote areas. It allows the ability for everyone to continually be able to rely more and more in this service. And then with coverage, responsiveness, this whole system grows. So more people start using more times, then more requirements of travel exist, and then the system continues growing, which is something that we've been seeing in Portugal as a clear case of success, where demand has then driven the growth of more drivers and more fleet partners providing the service. So dynamic pricing has that clear purpose of ensuring service reliability, that a trip exists when it needs to happen. And that is the power of upfront pricing, the upfront pricing on the driver's side and the upfront pricing on the rider's side. Full clarity for both parties in order to be able to provide the services. And so with this, I will pass on to my next co-panelist, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to present you how we do service support. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco, for your presentation on Uber's customer support. So now we go to Susanna and Raquel, who will present the role of AMT in the protection of consumers in ride-hailing services. Anna?
So good morning. Thank you again for joining us. So first of all, we know today that ride-hailing services, including TVDs, like we call it in Portugal, and taxis, are being increasingly recognized as an important complement to and extension of the public transport network. They have the potential to enlarge the catchment area of public transport, mainly through shorter, cost-effective transit, extending trips in marginal or low-density urban areas. Studies show that passenger experience is crucial to the success of the ride-hailing transportation industry, because passengers are more inclined to choose ride-hailing transportation companies or service providers that bring them a good experience. In other words, the passenger would easily satisfied by the physical attributes provided, such as the driver's garment, the interface of application, clean and tidy interior, and safety equipment. At the same time, the passengers believe that their wants or needs can be met if the service is delivered as promised. The fee is fair, the security is impeccable, and the drivers are trustable and can provide a prompt service. Recent studies and surveys across Europe and globally have revealed recurring challenges faced by consumers when using ride-hailing platforms. And this is similar to what Paulo from DECO showed us. Problems like pricing transparency. Many users report confusion over how fares are calculated. Dynamic pricing often lacks clear explanation, leading to frustration and perceived unfairness. Problems related to service quality and driver conduct. Complaints include inconsistent driver professionalism, poor vehicle conditions, and lack of communication skills. Some studies found that consumers value driver courtesy and vehicle cleanliness as top priorities. Problems like app reliability and customer support. Technical glitches, delayed ride confirmations, and lack of responsive customer service are common pain points. Users expect seamlessness, app experiences, and quick resolution of issues. Problems like safety and trust. While platforms promote safety features, some users feel vulnerable due to limited vetting of drivers or lack of real-time support during rides. This is especially relevant in markets with weaker regulatory oversights. And also environmental and ethical concerns. Consumers increasingly expect platforms to adopt sustainable practices, such as electric vehicles and fair labor conditions. And studies show that environmental awareness is influencing platform choice. Despite the challenges, studies also identify strong motivators for consumers. Convenience and flexibility, on-demand access and route customization, cost effectiveness, competitive pricing compared to traditional taxis, and social and environmental appeal, reduced car ownership and lower emissions when platforms promote shared or electric rides, especially when young consumers are concerned. The 2024 supervisory report by MT presents a detailed evaluation of TVDE services in Portugal, with a strong emphasis on consumer rights. While acknowledging improvements in legal compliance among operators, and this was already mentioned, the report identifies persistent issues that may compromise passenger safety and service quality. These include fraudulent licensing practices, substandard driver training, and misuse of vehicle rental contracts, often involving drivers who lack the necessary communication skills or operate under shared licenses. And this seems to be a problem also in the member states that participated in this webinar. So it's a common problem. It seems to be a common problem. Such practices undermine consumer trust and the integrity of the system. From a pricing perspective, and this was also already mentioned a few times, the report criticizes the lack of transparency in fare calculation algorithms used by digital platforms. AMT advocates for greater algorithmic accountability and the implementation of consumer-friendly pricing models that reflect actual service costs. These measures are essential to ensure fairness and informed decision-making for users of TVD services. The report also addresses environmental and social sustainability, noting that although the average age of TVD vehicles is relatively low, there's a maximum of 7 years, the adoption of electric or low emission vehicles remains insufficient. In the data available for 2023 in the International Association of Public Transport Statistics brief, both taxi and ride-hailing fleets have a minimal share of clean vehicles, 2% and 8% respectively, and this is around the world. This snapshot refers to the aggregated data, but there are differences among cities. Just as an example of the range, Toronto in Canada has a taxi fleet with 32% clean vehicles, whereas some other cities have shares below 1%. The key takeaway is that fleet electrification is at low levels and all stakeholders involved, including operators, infrastructure providers, and regulators, must work together to change the situation. It would be very interesting if we could publicly know the percentage of the fleet electrification in Portugal. AMT proposes legal reforms to protect consumers, promote safer and more sustainable mobility, and ensure that ride-hailing services operate in the public interest, and to improve oversight of training institutions and enhance data sharing obligations for platforms. I will now give the floor to my colleague Raquel to complement our presentation.
Can you see it?
We can see you, but not the presentation.
Okay.
Okay, now we can see the presentation.
Good. So, my name is Raquel, and I'm going to talk about the complaints book. In Portugal, the complaints book, known locally as the Livro de Reclamações, is a mandatory tool that allows consumers to formally report dissatisfaction with goods or services. The Livro de Reclamações is a legally mandated complaint system in Portugal, established in 2005 and updated in 2017. It enables
Raquel,
consumers. Yes?
Desculpa, sorry, are you moving forward? Because we are only seeing the slide, the last slide from Susana's part. Did you?
Okay.
So now we are seeing Livro de Reclamações. Is it okay?
Yes, it is okay. And now the slide 10, okay? Legal obligation for platforms, okay?
Okay.
The Livro de Reclamações is a legally mandated complaint system in Portugal, established in 2005 and updated in 2017. It enables consumers to file formal complaints against businesses or service providers. All establishments offering public-facing services must provide access to this book
both in physical and electronic format. The physical version must be available on site at all commercial locations. The electronic version, launched in 2017, made mandatory for all sectors by 2020. It's accessible at www.livrocommunications.pt. For TVDE, only the electronic version is mandatory, and this obligation applies exclusively to platform operators. Consumers can submit complaints free of charge, and businesses are legally required to respond within 15 working days. Regulatory authorities, such as sector-specific bodies like AMT, receive and process these complaints. Since 2017, Livre de Reclamações has registered nearly 1.4 million complaints, including almost 200,000 in 2024 alone. Essential public service, such as communications, electricity, gas, water, account for a significant share, especially via the electronic format. Transport and mobility service, including TVD platforms, also show a rising trend in complaints. These figures reflect consumer concerns around pricing transparency, service quality, contract issues, and digital platform accountability. The Livre de Reclamações empowers consumers to hold businesses accountable and helps regulators monitor market behavior. It also serves as a valid feedback mechanism for improving service standards and enforcing consumer rights. With the integration of QR codes and digital trackings, the system has become more accessible and efficient. In 2024, AMT complaints reports revealed a significant number of submissions from consumers using TVDE service, close to 1,000, highlighting growing concerns about service quality, safety, and transparency. These complaints were collected through various channels, including the electronic Livre de Reclamações and direct submission to AMT. In the first half of 2025, AMT received almost 500 complaints about TVDE in the electronic complaints book alone. The most frequent issues include problems with payments, refunds, and invoices, unprofessional driver behavior, including service cancellations, lack of response from platforms to consumer grievances, recurring themes in consumer complaints, driver training deficiencies. Many complaints stem from drivers' inability to communicate efficiently with passengers and lack of knowledge of local traffic rules. Fair transparency. A major source of dissatisfaction was the use of pricing algorithms without clear explanations. Consumers often felt misled or overcharged, especially during peak hours or adverse weather conditions. Platform accountability. Complaints frequently mention the absence of effective customer service channels, delayed responses, and lack of resolution mechanism for disputes. In response, AMT proposes several measures to strengthen consumer protection, stricter oversight of driver licensing and training institution, mandatory transparency in fare calculation algorithm, improved data sharing obligation for platform to support regulatory monitoring, enhancing consumer complaints handling protocols, including faster response times and clear escalation procedures. AMT emphasized that protecting consumer rights in TVD sector requires coordinated action between regulators, platforms, and operators. These complaints signal a need for improvement service delivery and customer support mechanism. There is also a considerable number of complaints from drivers and TVD operators regarding platforms operators, particularly concerned blocked access and payment issues. These complaints must be treated differently, as they do not concern consumer relations. This is between a consumer and a service provider. It is also important to note that platforms may operate their own complaint systems. Portuguese legislation does not prohibit this, provided that access to the Livre de Reclamações, physical or online, is ensured. Other entities, such as DECO, also receive and handle consumer complaints collaboration among all these entities is essential. Just a final note, AMT is implementing a complaint management system that leverages artificial intelligence to enhance complaint monitoring. This is essential that the state and its regulators adopt innovative technology system to keep pace with the evolving digital economy. And that's all. Thank you. Obrigado.
Thank you, Susanna and Raquel, for your presentation on the protection of consumers in ride-hailing services. We will now move on to the discussion. We have received some questions in the email address provided. So I'll just start. And for Bolt and Uber, and we'll start in the order of presentations. What mechanisms do you have in place to avoid non-registered drivers to access the application through the profiles of registered drivers? So we know this is an issue in Portugal, and apparently it's also an issue in other countries. So Mario, can you maybe start on this?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, we have the implementation that we did with the other regulator, IMT, where we validate all the data that comes from to us, so all the documents from the drivers, which means that it's very hard for you to falsify a document nowadays. Okay, so and then the IMT can provide a lot of data, including to Dr. Susanna, the number of EVs that exist in ride-hailing. That's a public number nowadays. The second thing is we actually do selfie checks regularly, okay? And that's a procedure normal in ride-hailing markets in order to validate that the person that is driving is actually the person that corresponds to the document. So I would say with those two in place, we have kind of a very strong confidence that people that are not eligible to drive, they cannot do it.
Thank you, Francisco. So, not.
Sorry. Now you can hear me. So in our case, when you think about right of access and compliance of service providing, you have to think about what happens before you get on the platform. So exactly what similar to what Mario was mentioning, the verification of a large array of documentation. And we're talking about a very robust set of documentation that before we even cross-check with the regulator, there is a cross-check between the documents. So human agents checking those documents one by one, verify the compliance of each document altogether, the verification that they're not tampered on, the verification on with layers of technology that allow us to verify whether those are forgeries or not. Then all those information input into the system, they are read by the regulator databases, not only IMT, but also the Ministry of Justice on the criminal record, the ASF in terms of vehicle auto insurance, also more recently with the Immigration Authority, IMA, the verification of the residency permit process. So cross-checking not only the document and entry, the legitimacy of the document, the interaction with external databases, then the final check, continuous check with the IMT database so that it continuously is verified. This is the very, very sophisticated system that highly disincentivizes the access of non-legitimate players. If you then add to that, when driving, the ability of riders to report when a driver is not matching the selfie of the image of the owner of the account, that then we also have permanent verification through facial recognition that vets drivers when going online in the middle of a service to prove that they are the right ones, with highly sophisticated anti-fraud mechanisms, because we know that these are things that throughout the years that we've had this technology, the more you restrict, the more then frauds can be sophisticated, and it's a fight of continuously evolving technology to be able to guarantee maximum compliance at all times in these cases. And so this is an unparalleled, uncompared type of technology that verifies the legitimacy of a service provider. Like everything at this scale of millions of trips happening per hour, these have it's not zero fail, and the point is how quickly we can capture and be able to then block the entire chain of fraudulent accessors, which is something that then our teams in community operations do very efficiently and very effectively.
Okay, thank you. So still for Bolt and Uber, and following the presentations by DECO and by AMT on the main reasons for complaints, so what are your strategies to deal with long waiting times for rides, poor quality of service or lowering quality of services, and an excess of vehicles combined with low ride acceptance? So I'm going to say it again. So your strategies to deal with long waiting times for rides, lowering quality of services, and an excess of vehicles combined with low ride acceptance. Mario, we can start with you.
Yeah, for sure. I've written down, Sophia, so I think I can tackle the three of them. So let's tackle 1 and 3 together, which I think it's a funny combination, like long waiting times and excess of vehicles. Well, if you have excess of vehicles, you don't have long waiting times. So here we can capture probably some perception bias, okay, in terms of excess of vehicles. I do agree that today in Portugal, waiting times are a bit longer, but that has to do with the increasing demand and not enough increase of supply. Okay, so and then that's a discussion that we can have on a higher level. But I do believe that we didn't even scratch the surface of the number of vehicles that would be necessary to give good mobility to the cities and the good complement to the public transportation network. So waiting times also have to do with acceptance of rides, but that's part of having this model that we have in Portugal, right? We have a 3-party model where the driver is independent and can accept or reject rides if he wants or not. So long waiting times most of the times have to do in big cities, not with availability of drivers, but the option that they have to choose, which is fair under the current circumstances. Then on the poor quality of service, I struggle a bit if you mean quality as time for arrival versus what you expected or what you wanted. It's a fair point already addressed before. Then we have to measure what does it mean quality. Okay, quality is a very abstract concept. Today, and as was mentioned before, the vehicles in Portugal are quite recent. Well, the law obliged to that, right? Maximum 7 years, which means that you have 300-something years average of vehicles. The vehicles are new. More than 30% are electrical vehicles in the sector. So I would say that in terms of the quality of the vehicle is good. The waiting times, yes, they are not perfect, but they are very short on average. Okay, I think we get a very high expectation, but price, time of wait, it's very good. So unless the people that are questioned can point specific quality dimensions, I don't see poor quality rather than the time or acceptance being an issue. But I will let Francisco to complement for sure.
Francisco?
Yes, so I think I agree with Mario in the dependency of long wait times with excess or not enough supply. I would add also that there's byproducts of how does long time happen. So long times can happen for 2 main reasons. The first one is exactly an unbalance between supply and demand, so much more demand than supply, and therefore service providers are occupied and cannot take the trip, and or have to come from very far away to take the trip, or are not accepting to take that trip. And that takes the second one, which is they are close, but they do not want that trip, and therefore that trip then jumps from driver to the furthest away, and then you are left with a driver that is no longer in an area that is appealing to take that trip, and that creates a perception that trips are bad for the community of drivers, and users are waiting a long time. And that's obviously something that the more rigid pricing mechanisms are, the more that will happen. Two, the less availability of supply, the more that will happen as well. So I think that then it answers both questions together. Then if you think about poor quality, I think that we need to discard it into peel the onion into multiple layers. So you have to think about vehicle quality. And I agree with Mario, the legislation already caps at 7, where you could argue that platforms could even go further in selecting even more stringent access to certain categories. And then the segregation among the portfolio, if you are a rider that values a luxury car with a top-rated driver, you take one product, Uber Black. If what you're seeking is the fastest, the most affordable option, you take Uber X. But there's a trade-off between the two in terms of the vehicle. There's no requirement in the rating of the drivers, so therefore you then have drivers who have been rated eventually poorer than others providing that service, and that potentially answers the question. But it all comes from the user's power to choose. The consumer has the entire power to choose what service he wants, and that's for us the key to this equation. Potentially, there's also a mismatch of expectations between what was the beginning when only Uber Black existed to now an array of options that allow you to pick from, and those trade-offs are real. And I think an encouraging piece, I would urge everyone to actually put everything into perspective. When we look at 16,000 complaint book in the AMT for, I imagine, all transportation sectors. I was not sure if it was only the TVD, but if it was only for the TVD, the entirety for TVD, we're talking about very likely, and I don't know the entire size of the industry, but I could guess that we're talking about less than 0.012 or 3%. So we're talking about the absolutely overwhelming majority of services are provided with no complaint. And therefore, I would also cautious around our bias towards seeing what we read and not seeing what we don't see, which is the vast majority of service takers and service providers that actually are not complaining and are actually because there's no book for celebration or no book for showing appreciation. And that is a very, very significant indicator to show that this is a service that reaches very, very, very high levels of quality and provider. Obviously, when things are bad, they need to be handled. And when things are bad, they can be very marking. But it is by far not the uniform reality of the industry. And I think that's very important to also put into perspective.
Sorry,
Thank
can I
you.
add just one thing? I know that the questions weren't addressed to me, but just to add some pinpoints on something that was mentioned before by my colleagues. First of all, about the perception, about the complaints. Just let me give you an example. Facebook, for example, in terms of illegal content, usually reports like 200 situations of illegal content that is reported by consumers. That doesn't mean that there is a problem with illegal content on Facebook. So when it comes to using the complaint books, it's a little bit challenging to find a complaint book in the Uber app So I think that sometimes the consumers don't use the complaint book because it's not easy and it's not easy to find. That doesn't mean that there are problems in terms of the service itself. And also when it comes to quality of service, I know that it was mentioned the vehicles, but what consumers sometimes mention is not the vehicle in themselves. It's the poor driving situation, it's the orientation of the GPS. And even when it comes to the perception of the fares and the fact that when we ask for the ride, there are several drivers, and when we ask and we get the ride, then we get the one that we have long waiting times. It could happen because you can imagine that you want to go to the airport. It's a very challenging effect. If you want to go to the airport and you ask in the application for a driver, and sometimes a driver is passing nearby you in the same street, but it doesn't, you ask for a driver, but it's not a driver, and the driver comes from like 2 kilometers. And the question for the consumer is, if I have several cars passing by on this street, why do I have to choose? And why the one that is affected is the other one, which is 2 kilometers far away from me? And maybe the idea is that probably the drivers that are in the place that I am asking doesn't seem to understand that the fare, or doesn't consider that the fare itself or the price itself is cost effective for them. So they refuse to accept this drive. So I don't know if it's a kind of perception, but sometimes it is a reality, and maybe it's related to the decision of the platform in terms of algorithms, in terms of the price transparency and the price formation. Maybe it's the relation between the driver and the platforms and even the operator. We don't know, but it's a fact that there are several complaints about it, and we shouldn't base on the fact that we only have this very small amount of complaints that consumers are very satisfied with the service itself. Just wanted to add this. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo. So one last question for everyone, but we'll start with Laura. So Laura, from a consumer protection standpoint, what improvements would you recommend? Just a brief, we are near the end, so just a brief answer.
Okay, from my point of view, maybe it's not directly to consumers, but to regulation in Latvia. We have been thinking about need to introduce criminal offense checks for drivers. We don't have that yet. We have administrative penalty checks and penalty point checks, which you get when you violate driving rules. But there definitely needs to be criminal offense checks. And about prices, we have cases when the prices, if there is traffic congestions, they raise, and during the ride, so the client pays one price, and after finishing the trip, the price raises. So probably we see the need of maximum possible price raise may be regulated. So that's for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We'll do it in order, Mario. So
I thought you were talking, Sophia, sorry. Okay, from the same perspective, I think there are basically 3 pillars that we should look at. Okay, first pillar, and agree, understanding what Paulo mentioned. Okay, but it's hard to talk about inexistent information in a way, right? We need to make sure that there is a better channel to funnel the reality, and then there is an even better channel to put it out, okay, in terms of communication, and maybe bust some myths that I believe exist, okay, but I do understand the concerns from Paulo from the consumer's perspective. Okay. Second, and here I think we did a great job, and the regulator did it as well, kind of giving more transparency to all the factors that are in the market. But I think that some transparency and some tools to actually segment, as Francisco was saying, nowadays you cannot segment properly the driver on its quality, its acceptance, it's harder, okay, due to the regulation. So some tools to make sure that we can at least inform the consumers of different profiles will help a lot as well to do that. So first, more channels of information, then more channels of communication, and finally some tools to do it.
Thank you, Mario. Paulo?
Thank you. I will be very brief. Just to mention that despite of the complaints and the concerns that we have, I think we have to acknowledge that these are very important services for the consumer. And I think that it adds quality and it adds disruptive services for what the citizens need. And I think in terms of mobility, it should be considered in a more integrated way. So that means that we are in part of that, in spite of that, we should be considered as partners and not enemies with the companies in terms of the consumer protection. There are still a little space for improvement. I think our legislation was clearly important and a very good case study at the time. I think that there is time and that we do need to improve the legislation itself, but we still need to put that in perspective of all the digital market. Again, there are a lot of discussions that are being taken nowadays. One of them is personalization. Another one is, of course, dynamic prices. And I think that we should sit together and discuss all these issues for the future, because in the end, what we want is that consumers should have good services, better prices, lower prices and better prices, and especially also technological innovation, mobility as a service. I think that we need to promote that and also improve accessibility, especially in particular areas with limited public transport. I think there is an opportunity for us all, and I think that we should sit together in the future. And also just one challenge for Uber and Bolt. It is important to work with consumer organizations. Please, let's sit together in the future with several meetings and let's create specific channels to discuss for future dialogues, because I think it's really important for consumers and also for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo. Francisco?
So I'll be very brief because I think a lot of it was already said, and I think it's about guaranteeing transparency, honoring transparency, continuing providing the best support wherever that claim comes from, Livre Reclamações Eletrónico, our own channels, even media and authorities, being very well, always trying to do better than the last time. And yes, Paulo, of course, we are always aiming to continue that wrong path, because our cities are still highly dominated by very inefficient mobility options that actually weigh a lot on families' budgets. And there's much smarter, much better ways for the environment, for society to do this. And that's why we always need to think about where the future is still very far away. There's a lot more to be done and a lot of value to be brought collectively to society than the reality that we are now. So crystallizing what exists nowadays without having the flexibility for what comes is something that we definitely need to be mindful of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francisco. Susana?
So I would say transparency, more transparency, technological developments, and like Paul said, working together. We know that the number of, although in Portugal is easy to make a complaint because of the complaints book and the electronic complaint book, which is a system that doesn't exist in other countries, and almost every citizen knows that it's possible to make a complaint in that form. The number of complaints is very low compared to the million of trips that are done by TVD each month or each year in Portugal. But the complaints are important for us because reading the complaints, we can see how the market is functioning. We know that not all of us are ready to make a complaint. The number of clients that make a complaint is small, and for us it's important to monitor and to supervise the market. So we try to look at it as a tool to help us regulate and monitor, an important tool, and we should all work together in order to improve the consumers' rights in this area. And so just let me one more question. From the technological point of view, the digital mobility and economy is growing wiser and each day. So from the state point of view and regulators also, it is important to have the tools to continue to monitor systems that use AI and other systems that can help us know in real time what is happening. And that is a problem within the states and also the regulators for us to have more innovative ways of monitoring the sector.
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you all for your valuable contributions throughout today's session. The discussions have provided important insights into the governance and supervision of ride-hailing services and highlighted the relevance of collaboration between regulators, platforms, and civil society. We hope this exchange will continue to inspire improvements in policy and practice across our respective countries. On behalf of AMT, I would like to thank all speakers and participants for their engagement. We look forward to future opportunities for dialogue and cooperation. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.